Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into something a little different this time. We've got a sermon all about this prophet, Habakkuk. Habakkuk, and you might not know him. He's kind of one of the lesser-known prophets,
Yeah, minor prophet.
minor prophet. But the stuff he's talking about, it's anything but minor, right?
Yeah.
This deep dive is all about wrestling with doubt, with faith, and with trying to figure out God's plan even when things get tough.
Yeah, it's about those big questions, the ones that really kind of keep you up at night. And it's interesting. Habakkuk, his name, it actually means one who embraces.
Embraces.
Yeah. You'd think, someone named Embracer would just go with the flow, accept things as they are. But he's not afraid to, really challenge God about how messed up the world seems.
It's like he's saying, hold on, God, I'm all about embracing, but what am I supposed to embrace when things are so messed up?
Hmm.
It's something we've all felt, right?
Absolutely. Those moments where we doubt, where we question. And the sermon, it actually kind of encourages us to wrestle with these things. It compares Habakkuk's spiritual struggle to, Jacob's wrestling match with God in the Old Testament.
Right.
Both encounters, they lead to transformation, to blessing, to a deeper understanding.
So it's not about avoiding the tough questions. It's more like leaning into them.
Exactly. Going through the struggle to get to the other side. And I think that's a pretty powerful message for us today because, let's be real, the world, it can feel pretty chaotic.
Oh, for sure.
Just like Habakkuk, we see the bad stuff, corruption, injustice, easy to feel discouraged.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, where is God in all this?
And that's where understanding comes in. The sermon, it uses this great analogy. There's this content creator, Lethal Shooter.
Oh, I've seen his videos. Amazing trick shots.
Right. Incredible. So think about it. He doesn't just try a trick shot once and give up. He practices
Yeah.
over and over until he gets it. He wants to understand every little detail, every variable.
So we should approach our faith with that same kind of dedication.
Exactly. Instead of just blindly accepting, we dig deeper, ask questions, try to understand what we believe.
Makes sense.
And when Habakkuk asks God those tough questions, the response, pretty amazing. It's like God saying, look, Habakkuk, you may not see it now, but I'm working on something incredible. Just you wait.
Okay, now I need to know, what's this incredible plan? What was God doing?
Well, to get that, we need some historical context. The Israelites, God's chosen people, they were kind of straying from the path, not exactly living up to their end of the deal.
Slipping away from their faith?
You could say that. And that's where the Babylonians come in, this powerful empire known for their military, but also for, their ruthlessness.
Right.
God actually used them as instruments of judgment.
Wait, God used this brutal empire to punish his own people.
Wow.
It's not just about punishment. It's about consequences and redemption. The Israelites, they faced the consequences, but it was also a wake-up call, a chance to remember God and come back to him, like a course correction.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. So the Babylonian exile, it's like a metaphor for our own struggles.
Exactly. Not a physical exile, more like a spiritual one.
Right.
We can get imprisoned by the ways of the world,
Oh.
lose sight of what truly matters. It's like we're living in this foreign land far from our real home in God's kingdom.
So how do we know if we're in this exile? What does it look like in our lives?
Well, the sermon uses this analogy of a snake. Sin, those choices that take us away from God, it can be subtle. It kind of sneaks in.
Oh, no, I don't like snakes.
Right. But think about it. It starts small, maybe a few compromises here and there, but before you know it, that sin, it can really wrap itself around you, squeezing tighter and tighter, taking away your freedom, your connection with God.
So those little compromises, they can lead us to this exile.
Exactly. And the sermon, it really wants us to look closely at our lives and ask, where have I let sin take root? Where am I being held captive? And more importantly, how do we break free? How do we find our way back home?
Yeah, that snake analogy kind of gives you chills. Really makes you think about how easy it is to fall into those traps, let those little compromises pile up.
It's easy to lose sight of things, when you're caught up in everyday life. That's why this whole exile thing, it really hits home. It's not just about physical walls. It's those mental and spiritual ones we build up ourselves.
It's like those echo chambers we all get stuck in.
Yeah.
Surrounded by people who all think the same, never really challenging our own views.
That's one way to be exiled, yeah. Trapped in your own little world, unable to see past your own biases, your own assumptions.
So you're saying having different opinions, different perspectives, that's actually a good thing.
Absolutely. The sermon, it really stresses how important it is to, engage with different viewpoints, even the ones we don't agree with. Recognizing that we don't have all the answers, there's always something to learn.
So how do we break out of those echo chambers then? Escape this exile? How do we start building that legacy of righteousness like the proverb says?
Well, the sermon talks about a few things. One of the most important, humility. Might sound kind of old-fashioned, but it's key to breaking out of those mental prisons.
I can see that. Humility, it means admitting you might be wrong, being open to changing your mind.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that your own view is limited. You got to actively seek out other viewpoints to grow. But that takes guts, right? It means challenging yourself, your comfort zone, even the people you're close to.
Yeah, it can be kind of scary to step outside your circle, to disagree with people you care about.
It can. But the sermon reminds us that real growth, the kind that leaves a real legacy, it usually means getting a little uncomfortable, pushing yourself to think critically, to question, to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's tough.
So humility is the starting point. But what else helps us build that life of integrity? A life that, reflects God's will.
Well, the sermon also talks about integrity itself. And I think that's where those daily choices come in.
You mean the little decisions we make every day?
Yeah. It's about making those choices line up with your values, even when it's hard, even when no one's looking. Doing what's right, not just what's easy.
So it's deeper than just following rules. It's about living a life that's true to who you are, what you believe.
Exactly. And that realness, that authenticity, it builds trust, creates a foundation for real connection with others, for strong communities, and ultimately for a better world.
Speaking of a better world, we talked about that verse from Proverbs earlier, the one about a good man leaving an inheritance for his children's children. Sounds like this legacy idea is really important in the sermon.
It is, and it ties back to integrity. The sermon says we're all responsible for the legacy we leave, not just for our kids and grandkids, but for the whole world.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility. How do we even start thinking about something that big?
Well, the sermon speaker says it's not just about money or stuff, it's about your impact on the world, the values you live by, the example you set for others.
So our actions, our choices, even the little ones, they can help make the world better for future generations.
Absolutely. And remember that idea about the wealth of the wicked benefiting the righteous? It reminds us that even when things are unfair, when it seems like evil is winning, there's a bigger plan happening.
You mean even if it's tough now, there's a kind of a cosmic justice that'll eventually win out?
That's the idea. And we have a part to play in that. We're called to make change happen, to use our gifts, our resources, to make the world more just, more compassionate.
I like that. It's empowering.
Right.
But gotta admit, it feels a bit overwhelming too.
I get it. It's a lot to take in. And actually, the sermon speaker acknowledges that. He ends with this really thought-provoking question. He asks the listener, what question are you wrestling with right now? What would a truly honest conversation with God look like for you?
That's a great question to end on. It makes each of us think about our own doubts, our struggles, our own way of building that legacy of righteousness.
It's a reminder that even when we're uncertain, even when we don't have the answers, we can always talk to God honestly. That's where real growth starts. That's where deeper faith begins.
That last part really, it really stayed with me. It's easy to listen to a sermon or a podcast and feel all inspired, But then how do we take all this humility, integrity, legacy, and actually live it?
It can be a little daunting, right? But remember, lethal shooter. He didn't get those trick shots overnight. It took dedication, practice, and a deep understanding of how things worked.
So we approach faith with that same intentionality.
Absolutely. We got to go beyond just, going through the motions, the sermon. It challenges us to really engage with what we believe, ask those tough questions, wrestle with the doubts until we get to a deeper understanding.
Become students of our own faith almost.
Yeah, exactly. And like any good student, gotta be willing to, question what you think you know, consider different perspectives, and admit when you're wrong.
Which brings us back to humility. But it's one thing to get it intellectually. It's another to actually live it, right? Especially when it seems like the world rewards the opposite.
You're right. It takes courage to choose humility, integrity, righteousness, especially when it feels like those choices, they kind of clash with the world's values.
Might face pushback, even opposition for, standing up for what you believe, like that Babylonian exile idea. Could end up feeling isolated, misunderstood, for choosing a different path.
You might. And the sermon doesn't shy away from that, but it also gives us this amazing promise that the wealth of the wicked is laid up for the righteous. It's like saying, ultimately, God's justice, it prevails.
So even if things seem unfair now, we can trust there's a bigger picture, a divine plan, unfolding.
Yeah. And we're called to be part of that, to live with integrity, act with compassion, be a force for good, even when it's hard.
That's a tall order. Where do we even start?
Well, the sermon reminds us it's not about these huge gestures or, heroic acts. It's the everyday choices, the small ones that reflect who you are. It's choosing honesty over deception, kindness over cruelty, forgiveness over holding grudges.
It's those little moments where we have a chance to make a difference, even if it's just for one person.
And just as important, finding your people, those who share your values, who'll support you on the journey. Because let's be real, we can't do this alone. We need each other.
We need those folks who challenge us, encourage us,
Yeah.
remind us why this all matters.
Exactly. And remember that question the sermon speaker asked. What are you wrestling with right now? What would an honest talk with God look like for you?
That's really at the heart of it all, isn't it? It's about diving deeper into faith, wrestling with those hard questions, and trusting that even in the doubt, God's there, working in our lives.
And the answers, they might surprise you, might lead you down paths you didn't expect, challenge what you thought you knew, and ultimately change you in ways you couldn't imagine.
This deep dive, it's been really thought-provoking, giving me a new way to look at what it means to live a life of faith, a life with purpose, a life that makes a real difference.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even when the world feels chaotic, uncertain, there's this deeper meaning, a legacy to be built, and a hope that carries us through.
So for everyone listening, what legacy will you choose? What impact do you want to make on the world?
Embrace those questions. Wrestle with them. Search for understanding. That's where it all begins.